Today is Tuesday the 14th of December. And today they've been voting on vaccine passports, amongst other things, in the House of Commons. And do you know, I've been deliberately avoiding that, the details of that vote, because it's a foregone conclusion. You know, I don't know what's happened. I don't know if they passed the vote or anything, but I know that they will. They'll pass for the vaccine passports, and you know, in preparation for crossing the next red line that, you know, no democratic free society should ever cross. They've crossed so many already. There's no reason why they won't cross them all now. So I don't actually know what the result of that is. It's now 11:15 at night. You know, that would have happened. The vote would have been taken already, I guess. And despite the fact there might have been up to 100 Conservative Party rebels, it makes no difference at all, because the Labour Party, the pathetic, cowardly Labour Party, which could have brought down the government, could have stopped this dead in its tracks, have decided they're going to vote with the government. So, you know, I don't know. Like I say, I don't know the details of what's happened, but I hold out not the slightest bit of hope that anything other than what was most likely to happen hasn't happened. And you'll have, you know, my regular viewers will be aware that I've not released a video for, you know, almost a month now. And, you know, the reason for that is that, once again, I'm not really quite sure what to say. You know, I don't know what to say. And I mean, there's plenty I can say, but I certainly don't know what to say that will make any difference. You know, and it almost certainly won't make any difference. And it seems as if, you know, I've come to the conclusion that there is only one thing that makes any difference. Because, you know, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, France, Italy, Germany, Austria, Holland, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and now England. It doesn't matter what political system there is. It doesn't matter what constitutions might have been, you know, soberly drawn up. It doesn't seem to matter if there's a Bill of Rights about the limits on government power. None of these things make any difference. It doesn't make any difference. All the fine words in the world do not make any fucking difference whatsoever. The Nuremberg Code, the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, on bioethics, the European Court of Human Rights. None of these things make any difference. They just ride roughshod over it all. They pretend these things were never written. They just ignore them. There is only one thing that makes any difference. And that one thing is the thing that seems only to have happened in one country. And then not all over the whole country either. And that one country, you will not be surprised to know, is the United States. And the only thing that makes any difference is that the American population is armed, and nobody else is. We're not. The French aren't. The Germans aren't. Well, I understood the Canadians were, but it doesn't seem to have made any difference there either. The Australians are no longer armed. And the New Zealanders were armed until, was it 2-3 years ago? And then they had that outrage. And now they're not armed anymore either. There is no reason why this situation won't go all the way to concentration camps. There's no reason at all. I don't think it will go to gas chambers, but only because of the optics. If there hadn't been gas chambers in the Second World War, you know, there's no reason to suspect there wouldn't be gas chambers this time. But there's an issue of optics there. You know, they don't want to. They wouldn't use gas on us because that's what the Nazis used on the Jews, and they, you know, that'll just make them look bad. But you know, concentration camps. Rechristened quarantine camps or secure holding centres or whatever other euphemism they might choose are a reality in Australia, for instance. You know, there have been rumours. I don't know how true they are. That there is a network of super prisons being built in this country, you know, that will take 12,000-15,000 people apiece. You know, there isn't any reason why this won't go all the way to concentration camps and keeping the undesirables under lock and key. And the only reason I do this is, as I've said before, is just because there's a record. You know, there will be a record, so long as it doesn't get memory hold, which of course is entirely feasible, perhaps even likely. But so that there is a record of my disagreement with what's happening. Because I certainly don't expect anything that I say to make any difference at all. You know, it hasn't so far, and it's not likely to make any difference from now on. So the only thing that will make a difference is if we are armed. It seems to be that way. I was talking to a friend this evening who disagrees actually. Who disagrees and maybe it isn't the only thing that makes a difference, but it's the only reason why America has not been castrated in the same way that the rest of us have is because they're armed and we're not. That's the only reason. it's not the American Constitution that has prevented that happening, and it's not the Bill of Rights. It's because they're armed. However, this friend of mine believes that that's not. It's not the only thing. And in theory, I agree with him. He believes that it's just non-compliance is the only thing that is the way to go. Which, you know, we're all saying that on our side of the aisle, non-compliance. And with the reintroduction of the fucking stupid, idiotic mask mandate, you know, quite a lot of the sheep have just complied, as they always have. But I have noticed that it's nowhere near 100%. You know, it's maybe 60%. I've been into numerous petrol stations and shops and not worn a mask, and I've not been challenged. I even went into a Tesco Express in Manchester the other day with 2 policemen in there who seemed to be investigating something else. And I wasn't challenged in there either. So I think the compliance isn't as extensive as it was, but they are ramping it up, as you will be aware. You know, the hit pieces on the unvaccinated, the lies about how many vaccinated people are in the hospital, and the lies are broadcast, and people who know the truth challenge the lies, and their challenges get upheld, and it makes no difference. And they repeat the same lies the following day, and they get challenged, and the challenges get upheld, and it makes no difference. But I do, I do think it's difficult to be sure about this. It's just an impression. I've got no figures to back it up. And even if I did have, there would be somebody will come along with some lies to cover up and to counteract my figures. So it's a pointless game. It's a pointless chase anyway. But I have heard anecdotally that there are people who are beginning to realise that they might have been conned with the booster. You know, we're probably getting, you know, I don't watch the television, don't read the newspaper, so I don't know, but I've heard anecdotally that the queues around the block for the booster. But those are not people who haven't been vaccinated. Those are the fucking morons who've already been vaccinated and are going back for more of the same. You know, they're the enthusiasts, the COVID enthusiasts. They're the people who like the lockdown, who like the restrictions, who like being told what to do, who like to believe that they're good people because they've basically done what the government told them to do. They think their obedience is good. But I can't imagine that 5 or 6 or 11 or 21 million people, depending on which figures you believe, who are unvaccinated. I don't believe they're turning up at the vaccination centres for their boosters. You know. So there may be, you know, there may be some hope there. You know. Hard to tell. It is hard to tell. I've just joined a group called UK Citizen 2021, which I have mentioned before, but they do seem to be like the only. They do seem to be like the only group that has any kind of plan, which isn't political lobbying, you know, because that doesn't make any difference either. That's not making any difference. I mean, you know, I didn't even bother writing to my MP to, you know, encourage him to vote against vaccine passports. To give him his due, he's supposedly one of the rebels, or he was yesterday or the day before. Whether he follows through, I don't know. But the fact there has been a serious rebellion of maybe 100 Conservative MPs is significant. I mean, it won't make any difference, but it is. Each bit of resistance, does help, because it moves the anti-vaccine mandate opinion away from what people believe to be the lunatic fringe, you know, the anti-vaxxers, you know. I mean, one of the things that is slightly depressing about this is there's so many people who say they've had the vaccination, but they don't agree with the vaccine mandate. Now, it's a noble position. That is a noble position. I'm not knocking it, and if people genuinely are of that position, you know, I applaud them. The trouble with that is that every time that somebody does go and get the vaccination, they weaken the argument against it. Unless they are extremely outspoken about it. Maajid Nawaz is one of those, I consider to be one of those very noble exceptions, because he's been solid on this ever since the beginning. And there's nothing that he said in all this time that's ever since March 2020 there's nothing that he said that you could object to, really. I mean, even, you know, he even wished Boris Johnson well when he was supposedly in hospital in intensive care, and you know, and he never swayed from his humanity, you know, even though you might think that Defeffel Johnson doesn't deserve any humanity. You know, you may think that. I couldn't possibly comment. So there is, you know, there are some bright points in the darkness, even though the darkness does seem to be overwhelming for much of the time. But one thing I'm convinced of is that there is no, you know, there's no political solution to this. You know, it's just this, and people are still saying things like, "Well, we'll remember you at the next general election." You know, they're kind of assuming there will be another general election. You know, I mean, everything else has been turned on its head, and you know, you can't be sure there will be any more general elections. You can't be sure of that at all. You know, I might have thought that they wouldn't have gone against the Nuremberg Code or the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You might have expected that that would be lines that they wouldn't cross, and they crossed them. They crossed them without a second thought. So this sort of faith in democracy is, you know, it's naive at best. You know. But what, you know, so this group UK 2021, I would, they're on Twitter and they've got a Telegram group. Now I've said I'll get involved. It seems a bit chaotic at the moment. You know, they've got to get themselves together. I mean, I haven't done anything yet. You know, I'm not really quite sure what I'm supposed to do at the moment, but I will get to grips with it. So I would urge you to maybe join them, and that they are. It's a nationwide thing. They're trying to get people in. Is doing it county by county. So there are local. There's a local core in every part of the country. So, you know, have a look at them, and you know, words don't do anything. You know, they're not. No matter how fine the words are, they're not doing anything. So something else has to be done, and we'll have to sort of try and find out what that other thing is. Bearing in mind that we're all unarmed. But it's very disorientating to find that this is happening, and no amount of logic or reason seems to make any difference. And this was brought home to me recently when I was talking to a friend of mine. This is a different friend from the last difficult conversation I had that I made a video about. This was someone I hadn't seen to talk to about anything, and for some time, and about 18 months ago, he made an aside that he'd been watching one of my videos, and he sort of kind of chuckled about it as if it was something interesting, you know, that maybe we could talk about, you know, and this is somebody that I like and I respect, and I respect his opinion, and he is a very intellectual chap, very intellectual, and he's very intelligent. And if I'm honest, well, he's more intelligent than I am. Shall we put it that way? Basically, he's a significantly more intelligent person than me, and you know, he's an Oxford University graduate. You know, he's built a good business. And you know, he's a pretty wealthy man, I think now. He sold his business and stuff, and you know, he's someone he's always had an interesting take on things, and so I've always kind of respected his opinion. And one of the reasons that I find him interesting to talk to is that because we could all be in the pub, you know, 5 or 6 or 7 of us all around the pub, and we could argue about things, and we would be beginning to come to a consensus about what the particular issue of the day was. And this guy was not afraid to bung in a hand grenade at the end of just as everyone's coming to a consensus, and blow the consensus out of the water, you know. And he always had an interesting take on things. So I never got to discuss I never got the chance to discuss any of my videos with him, because I was interested to you know, to know what he thought, and it just so happened we I was out with him and a mutual friend, and this other mutual friend had to go for some reason, so it was just me and him, and so we got talking about this. And I had been warned by my mutual friend that this guy had little patience with the anti-vaxxers. That's what he said. You know, as if anti-vaxxers don't deserve any patience. You know, so I was forewarned, but I did want to know what he thought, and you know, the subject came up, and I just said about all this COVID shit, and immediately his hackles went up. Immediately, it was like turning a switch. And he goes, and he said, "Are you sure you want to talk about this?" With the implication being that if we talk about this, we're going to end up having a row and we might fall out. That was immediate. It was just immediate. It was like turning a switch. Flicking a switch, rather. And it's funny because I kind of wanted to know what he thought, and because I respect him, I suppose I was looking for a bit of approval from my point of view, and I didn't get it. You know, I absolutely didn't get it. What I got was an immediate bristling that this was the subject that we don't really want to be talking about. And you know, and like I say, he'd been watching my videos 18 months ago, and one of the first things he said to me, he says, "I've stopped listening to people about this. I've stopped listening to you. I don't watch your videos anymore." That's what he said, and which was pretty blunt, you know. But it wasn't. It's not that that wasn't unexpected, you know, because he's a very intellectual person, and I wasn't expecting him to just agree with me to be polite, you know, and I wasn't expecting that. But I wasn't expecting the bluntness that I got, because it wasn't an intellectual to and fro. It wasn't that. It was, "I don't like the discussion, now shut up." Now, to give him his due, he wasn't disrespectful and he wasn't rude, but he was blunt. And him saying, "I don't watch your videos anymore," was a way of him saying, "Don't imagine there's any common ground here between the two of us. Don't imagine there's any common ground, because there isn't. I don't agree with you." And the words conspiracy theorist and anti-vaxxer were thrown around pretty immediately, you know. Now, if I'm honest, I didn't fire back immediately. I wasn't meek, but I wasn't argumentative. And if I'm honest, I felt intellectually intimidated by him, you could say. That's as honest as I can put it. And, you know, like I say, I didn't go out all guns blazing, but I wasn't completely meek, and I said to him that, you know, I just think that what's happening here is that, you know, our freedom is becoming conditional on us, on something like a vaccine. You know, it's like on taking a medical procedure. And to give him his due, he did warm up a little bit, and he did say, well, when government gets power, they never want to give it back again, and that was kind of his concession. That was his concession. But, you know, and when we parted, he said, "It was nice speaking to you. It was nice chatting to you again," which was nice, you know. And like I say, he wasn't disrespectful and he wasn't rude, and we didn't have a row. but it was very much that I was wrong and I wasn't to be entertained and my questions weren't valid. And this was really weird to me. For someone so intellectual, I was expecting him to kind of draw me out a bit, even to draw me into a trap, even. But he didn't do that. He just, the hackles came up and it was hostile immediately. As I say, he pulled back from us actually having a row, but it was very much a threat. It was implied, we go too far down this road, we're going to have a row. And that was the impression I got. And I thought about it for several days afterwards. And I was thinking, why is it that on this subject we can't discuss it? In previous times, when we were discussing all sorts of different things, you'd have half a dozen blokes sitting around the table, and it was almost like a competition, a bit of competition of banter that each person would come up with a theory as to why things were happening, and you could call them conspiracy theories, you could call them conspiracy hypotheses, or you could just call them theories. And previous to that, people would come up with some thoughts about some things, and each viewpoint would be considered, and sometimes it would be rubbished, in a sort of jokey way, but often it would be, people would be heard, and it was just sort of intellectual curiosity, is that people would say, well, why were they doing this? Why did they do that? Why, we'd add all these things into the mix, and people would come away with different viewpoints about why something had happened in the way that it had. And I thought that was so healthy. But it's on this subject that it's not, somehow on this subject only, it's not allowed. And I'm still struggling to find out why that is. The Brexit debate. That got a bit fraught. It did get a bit fraught, but I was able to respectfully disagree with some of my friends who didn't agree, didn't share my viewpoint, and I didn't fall out with them, and I found it astonishing that people would fall out over something like that, which was basically just a political question, which didn't have any sort of course, had wide consequences, but it shouldn't have had consequences so much that it would break families and friendships apart. I've got 2 or 3 of my friends who are were proper Remainers, and they remain so now, but we're still friends, and it seemed ridiculous to me that you might fall out over something like that. But so it's not as if we're strangers to fractious discussions, but it just seems that this particular discussion, is the one that brooks no argument. And like I say, I'm puzzled as to why that is. And You see, the thing is that I know why this is so important to me and why I want other people to agree with me. Because apart from, you know, things in my personal life, my family and my friends, living in a free society is the most important thing in the world to me. You know, it's the most important thing in the world, except for those few things I just mentioned. And there is nothing in life that's more important than that. Not making money, not anything. You know, maybe making money should be more important to me, but it isn't. You know. And because it's that important to me, I want people to agree with me, because I want other people to want a free society as badly as I do. So I know why this is so important to me. But what I can't understand is why their point of view is so important to them. What I can't believe that I can't believe that the most important thing in the world to them is that they want to be safe from COVID. I can't believe that. I don't understand why that would be something that was the most important thing to them. I can't believe that they're that scared of it. I can't believe that they don't know that it's got a 99.7% infection fatality rate or whatever it is. I can't believe that they really believe that they're that vulnerable. Now, this guy was only my age. You know, he's healthy. You know, he's slim. He's healthy. He's, you know, he's a vegetarian. You know, I mean, he's even a Brexiteer. You know, he's a Brexiteer because he doesn't like all this globalist shit. You know, and if this COVID stuff isn't globalist, I don't know what is. But, you know, I can't believe that he believes that this virus is an existential threat. I can't believe that. I can't believe that he really thinks that. And it's just astonishing to me that this is the one subject that we're not allowed to disagree on. You know, because and I only recently, in the last year or so, found out that he was in favour of Brexit. You know, and which means that he can't have been afraid to have discussions with people that didn't share his viewpoint. You know, he must have had discussions with Remainers. You know. So I'm just puzzled by that. I'm puzzled by why he thinks that that's so important. And there must be something underneath it. There must be something underneath it that an intelligent, curious, intellectual man like him doesn't want to discuss things on an intellectual basis. You know, and maybe he just thinks, I mean, the trouble with bandying words around like conspiracy theorists is what that means is, when someone calls you that, is what they mean is that you're foolish. They think you're a fool. And because they think you're a fool, they must think you're stupid. And because they think you're stupid, they can have no respect for you. You know, and so I'm forced to sort of conclude that this guy doesn't actually have any respect for me. Which is not pleasant. But there's also something else. There's also something fucking darker in this as well, because he obviously hadn't been following what's been happening in Europe quite as closely as I was, and he was, this is 2 or 3 weeks ago. I told him that they passed a law saying that everyone in Austria had to be vaccinated. It's compulsory vaccination. And I told him that, and quick as a flash he said, well, I see no problem with that. And I kind of hid my reaction to him, but I was shocked by that. I really was shocked by that, because I know that in the same way that he wouldn't agree with me just to be polite, it also makes me believe that if they came for me to take me off to the gulag because I hadn't been vaccinated, that he wouldn't be too polite to do anything about it. He wouldn't be, he if that's what he thinks now, when they're not taking me off to the gulag, he wouldn't change his mind when they actually came to take me off to the gulag, and he would stand by and let them do that. And that's what is so scary about this. Like I say, this is a bloke I like and respect. So what am I to do with that piece of information? This is a friend of mine. A friend of mine with his, I guess, with his own principles that he wouldn't, I'm assuming he wouldn't compromise. And what I mean by the principle of being honest, because if he believes that he has no problem with forced vaccination, which is what this is, mandates or compulsory, and let's call it what it is, which is forced vaccination. If he has no problem with that now, he will also have no problem with half a dozen people holding me down and forcing a vaccine into my arm. Against my will, obviously. So he would have no problem with the state violating my bodily sovereignty. So this is the kind of thing we're up against here. And it's funny that thing, he sees no problems with it. He's got no problems with forced vaccination. I mean, it's not even get started on the ineffectiveness of the vaccination. Or the adverse reactions. Yeah. Now, like many of us, we have had to become sort of armchair virologists. I mean, I don't fucking know anything about viruses. I don't know anything about medicine. But we're having to sort of... The two options that are open to us are we either just blindly follow everything we're told. And since when was that ever a good approach? Or we have to try and pick through and question what we're being told to try and get to some sort of truth, rather than just blindly believing whatever we're told. And sometimes we'll get it wrong. Sometimes we'll listen to the wrong people. Sometimes, we'll be prey to, misinterpretation of data. And it's difficult to argue against this, when you have no credentials, because the first thing anybody says is, well, are you a doctor? Well, I'm not a doctor. But is Bill Gates a doctor? No, he's not a doctor, but he's a billionaire. So does that mean he knows more about this stuff because he's a billionaire than I do? I mean, probably because he's got billions of quid and he can research a bit more than I can. He doesn't have to go to work every day. Probably does know a bit more about this stuff, but he's not a fucking doctor. And there are plenty of doctors who are doctors and have been doctors for decades who don't agree with him. And another thing that this friend of mine was saying was these things that he tossed around before he got into this. He made several sort of snide comments about, not really snide comments, but he rubbished the idea of social media as it's just sort of a bit of a, it's a problem, fucking social media, people don't know what they're fucking talking about, and I mean, and he's often not wrong in that, often that is the case, but the trouble is that the social media and YouTube and Twitter and all the other platforms that are out there, these are the only, these are the only counter narratives there are. If we didn't have social media, there wouldn't be any resistance at all. There just wouldn't be. Because it's all. There just wouldn't be any counter narrative. So the echo chambers that that I'm in and everybody else who engages in this stuff is in. They do have a use. I mean, it's. Do I receive and seek out ideas that agree with mine? Yeah, of course I do. Yeah, and the reason I do that is because the stakes are so fucking high, because with every passing day that that this goes on, the more my free society slips away from me. The more the biomedical fascist surveillance state gets embedded, and I don't want that to happen, and I will ally myself with anybody who prevents that from happening, and sometimes you're going to have some fruitcakes on your side and sometimes you're not, you know. But if it wasn't for people having their own voice, well, we'd be in the surveillance state already. We'd be in the biomedical fascist state already, you know. And considering how many powerful forces there are against us, you know, it's kind of surprising it actually hasn't happened yet. But the only reason it hasn't happened is because of the sewer that is Twitter. You know, and this was the same with Brexit. You know, it's like they're just slagging off people who have a different viewpoint. You know, and since when was it ever a bad idea to question authority? When was it ever a bad idea to do that? You know, when were the censors ever the good guys? But the good news is that I think that the positive in this is that there is a hard core of people like us that are not going along with this, and they've reached that hardcore. You know, I don't think the vaccine take-up is going up at all. You know, they keep trying to bring out more threats and more coercion and more sanctions, and it's not actually making any difference, which is why you're getting disgusting articles from people like Andrew Neil, the so-called respected journalist Andrew Neil, suggesting that the unvaccinated should be punished, despite the fact that there's no logic to that at all. You know. But I mean, if you were to take Austria as an example, you know, and I'm not completely sure of my figures, but it's what I've read, you know, and I've not seen it challenged, is that out of a population of 9 million people, 2.8 million people are unvaccinated. And, you know, do they have 2.8 million policemen or 2.8 million police cells? No, they don't. You know, the Jewish population was in 1933 in Germany was 0.75% of the population. Less than 1%. That's how they were bullied. That's how they were able to be bullied and persecuted. Because they were less than 1%. You know, in Austria, you know, it's getting on for 30%. You know, they can't force it. They can't. You know, this threat of forced vaccinations is the emptiest of empty threats. You know, they can't do it. The only way they can do it is that if they pick off people one at a time. You know, and it doesn't seem like that the people who are refusing are not going to comply anytime soon. nevertheless, it's just astonishing the position we're in now. That every single thing that made the West the West and made it wonderful is being dismantled for the sake of a virus with a 99.7% infection fatality rate. I mean, it's almost as if the past 75 years of peace and freedom and prosperity count for nothing. It all has to be sacrificed. It all has to be sacrificed. Everything that makes life worth living has to be sacrificed so that a few timid individuals can live a bit longer. Or they can be released from the fear of having of catching some disease, and remember, for people who aren't vulnerable, which is people who are very old and with a number of underlying medical issues, apart from those people, this whole thing isn't all that serious. Well, in fact, it's not serious. It's completely. It has a completely normal amount of seriousness to it. And somehow, all of that has been forgotten. It's almost like we knew that yesterday, and now today we don't know it. But it's up to us. We're the hardcore. We're the hardcore, and we're not about to swallow this shit anytime soon. If we were going to, we would have swallowed it already. And it's as bleak as it seems. Just imagine how delicious it's going to be when we're finally vindicated. And we will be. Good night.